most other companies can have as many as 75% of the executive directors. A survey was conducted in 2007, and that survey revealed that 48% responses revealed that more than 75% people on the board were executive directors. So this kind of combination of executive and non-executive, and this element of independence in independent directors, which we are trying to now reinforce, this is somewhat lacking in the present code. Not that we are not aware of this particular aspect in the beginning, but as you start off as a new regime, you've got to go a bit slow on that. You've got to go a bit soft on that. And the then chairman of ICAP, Mr. Khalid Mirza, was very conscious of that. And when we discussed and debated for days and weeks, and we came to this conclusion, okay, at least let us make a beginning, and any limit is better than no limit at all. Because as I keep saying on occasions such as this, that most of our boards of directors in the private sector are not more than dining table. Most often the father of the family, the patriarch of the family will be the chairman, the eldest son will be the chief executive, the next will be perhaps a director of finance or purchases or procurement or marketing or whatnot. So the direct boards are not really having that kind of complexion and representation which it ought to have. What we are suggesting, our task force has recommended, that the executive directors be not less than 2. There is a merit in having executive directors on the board. They have a useful role to play. They make a very good and significant value addition to the deliberations of the board, being part of the management process. But then it doesn't mean that their proportion, their sort of presence should be disproportionate to the other people on the board. So what we are saying here is that not more than 1/3 of the elected directors, a minimum of 2 and not more than 1/3, including this chief executive, could be executive directors. And we are not saying that, supposing if this is notified in some due course of time, we are not asking the boards to bring about this change overnight. We are conscious of the fact that companies do need time to switch over. It's a major change. In our country, particularly getting the right kind of material as directors is not all that easy. And of course now with PICG being there, it's playing a very useful role in churning out the right kind of people who could qualify as directors on the board. So we have a hope that in due course of time we will have a good reservoir of people with rich experience, knowledgeable, committed to the objectives of the corporate sector, and who can make a very useful contribution on the board. So we are saying that next time when your board is reconstituted, and if at all this recommendation goes the way we are presenting to you this evening, they should bring about this change at the time of the next reconstitution. So that you have due time to think over it, approach the right kind of people, prepare them mentally also, and prepare others also who are sitting on the boards for requesting them to make way for others to come. This is one of the very important recommendations that we have made. The next is about the independent directors. You would recall the 2002 code was very sort of accommodative in terms of certain provisions. Sometimes we use the word it is desirable, sometimes we use the word it is preferable to do this, etc., etc. Because as I said, we were conscious of the fact that we are making a beginning in this particular direction, and we ought to be cognizant of the ground realities in the corporate sector in our country. So if we bring in very stringent measures to begin with, the corporate sector might find it difficult to implement that. But now with the rich experience of 8 years, I think it's a reasonably good experience now. So it is about time that what could not be done as initio in that code, those particular features be brought into this revised code whenever it comes, let us see. And in that we have recommended that the proportion of independent directors now need to be increased. Right now the code says at least one person on the board should be independent director. Right now the code says the provision is couched in principle that who an independent director is. And the gist of that is one who is able to bring to bear an independent frame of mind in terms of the decisions of the board, in terms of the objectives of the company, and so on and so forth. But we have gone a step further, as I illustrate shortly. But when it comes to numbers, banks and DFIs, you would recall, even today, are required to have 25% of the board as independent members. I was just going through an article a few days back in the wake of the international financial fiasco. And it is being debated in the West whether independent directors have failed to avert that kind of a financial catastrophe across the borders, whether they have played the due role when it comes to perks and remuneration of the directors. Have the independent directors provided the right kind of, well, I won't use the word impediment, but the right kinds of checks and balances in order to bring about a semblance of discipline in that? So it is being debated in the West also, how far independent directors' role will make the quality of the board decision making more positive, more objective oriented, more independent, and more positive and sophisticated. What we are suggesting from the task force is that there should be, in principle we are talking about, that there should be a balance of executive and non-executive directors. And that balance is conveyed in the numericals that I just now explained to you, that executive directors cannot exceed a certain number and non-executive directors ought to be there. And we are saying not less than 1/3 or 3, whichever is higher. Not less than 1/3 of the total number of elected directors, or 3, whichever is higher, should be independent directors. And again, this particular requirement shall become effective from the composition of the board when it takes next. So you have due time. Not every board, every company with a press of button will have to bring about independent directors. It is important, yes, it should have been done yesterday, but when you are making a transformation or a change, we need to give reasonable time for people to make it happen. And we thought that the best, we are not fixing a date. We are not fixing that this particular requirement will become effective from so-and-so date, because that is not feasible and that is not desirable either. What we are saying is, whenever your next board is going to be reconstituted, that will be the time when you should bring about the reinforcement of the board in the context of executive, non-executive balance and the element of independent directors on the board. So this has been one of the core recommendations that we have made from the task force. And just for information, let me share with you that the independent survey of 2007, it has revealed that 23% of the respondents did not have any independent non-executive director on the board, which is a fairly large number, 23%. And only 8% had one such director, because they just stuck to the letter of the law of the court, because it said at least one director should be, so they did not go beyond that. They said, okay, one is a requirement, why be more pious than thou Pope? Okay, fine. So only 8% had one independent director, and 23% did not have any independent director at all, non-executive directors. Would you like me to stop here? Okay. On the subject of independent directors, we have enumerated, and this is not something which is all 100% homegrown. We have benefited from the codes of other developed jurisdictions as well, and having taken into cognizance our own realities here in the corporate sector, we have enumerated certain situations where if a person is struck by any of these, I would call it disabilities, he may come on the board as a director, but he would not qualify as an independent director if he has been an employee of the company within the last 2 years. Now it is very common, you even know more than me, those who are from industry, that it is very common that if a certain executive has retired from the company, having served as a marketing director or finance director or whatever, it is very common for the companies to invite him to come on the board. Well, fine, you can still continue doing that. He could be invited. He could be a useful addition. He has got rich experience of his own company. He has served there for long years. He has superannuated from there. And therefore, he is a reservoir of knowledge and experience. But at the same time, that element of independence which we are looking for, that would be seen to be lacking. And therefore we say